Hi, welcome to the Catholic Corner. I'm Monsignor Walter Nolan. According to the National Health Council, incurable and ongoing chronic disease affects approximately 133 million Americans. That's 45% of the country's total population about. The council also reports that the daily activities of about 1/4 of them, which would be approximately 33 million, are limited by their chronic conditions. My guest today is a deacon of our church, Deacon Richard Cheu, and he's the author of the book, Living Well with Chronic Illness, a practical and spiritual guide. It's a marvelous, marvelous presentation. Deacon Richard is a neurophysiologist, he's an EMT, stress management consultant, and as I mentioned, an ordained Catholic deacon. He currently serves in the Archdiocese of New York and volunteers as a hospital chaplain. This book is a terrific read. Deacon Richard, thanks for coming with us today.
Thank you for having me on your show.
It is just marvelous, marvelous. Tell me a little bit before we discuss the book itself, because it's a marvelous presentation. I understand that there was an article where you referred to our current situation as the perfect healthcare storm. Can you explain what that means?
Yes, well, a perfect storm has, different forces converging, like Hurricane Sandy we just had recently.
I know.
We
Perfect
all know
storm.
about that.
Everybody
That was
knows that
a perfect
one.
storm. Well, the perfect healthcare storm is because we have Obamacare coming next year, and it's going to bring in millions and millions of new patients, but there's a shortage of doctors already right now. We're short about 15,000 primary care doctors. Those are the ones you and I see first. When we go to have a problem, we see them first. They're short that many doctors. There are growing shortage of people like home health aides and people who help people who are chronically ill. And so we have this convergence of many patients, and also this baby boomers are becoming seniors at the rate of 10,000 a day. And they bring with them chronic illness. Most seniors have one chronic illness, and a large percent of them have two chronic illnesses, which means that their needs are very great, and here comes the perfect healthcare storm.
No, I guess in my own mind I'm thinking not only doctors, etc., but would they also need, I guess, more physical therapy places and of that nature that to keep the limbs going and the legs
Absolutely.
going?
I mean, to take care of a chronically ill patient, it takes a virtual army. That begins with your doctors, your therapists, your OTs, your PTs, and then you have advisors of all sorts. And it takes caregivers, takes family and friends. This army is constantly changing, and the needs of a chronically ill person, which we tend to think of as being constant, aren't. They change day by day. And so their needs start to grow, the need for more help at a time when it's getting hard to get help.
At a time when their own time span, so to speak, gets a little more severe for them to
Yes,
do
it
things.
is.
I mean, just getting dressed and those kind of
Right.
things. Tell me, what are the key problems that you see when someone has to live with a chronic illness of some type?
Well, I think it's like an onion. There are layers, and the first layer is mental. When there's a diagnosis of a chronic illness, that's usually very devastating for the patient. What? I'm going to have to live with this for the rest of my life. That chronic illness causes that diagnosis, leads up to just a wave of negative emotions that can overwhelm and just freeze the patient and keep them from doing anything positive.
So that's the first thing.
That's the first thing. So I look at it as the first step is to work on the mental issues because of these negative emotions. When we get those calm and even get rid of them, because I call them excessive baggage, excessive emotional baggage, what we can get rid of allows them to calm down and then work on the health side. Healthy habits, become physical, because that gives you now the physical strength. The mental clearing up the emotions gives you emotional strength, and then we work on the spiritual. Those are the three aspects I think can lead a chronically ill patient to live a very meaningful life.
And part of that, I would imagine, could be their self-worth. to say, you know, can I be productive to society? Can I be productive to my family? Or can I be productive to myself?
Right. And, you know, I meet patients who say, oh, there's nothing left for me. And it's not absolutely not true, but they are looking backwards at what they were. By using the methods in the book of resolving some of the mental issues, and then again the physical and the spiritual, we turn them around so they're looking forward into seeing what their future
I don't want to
can be.
really jump ahead because I got all kinds of thoughts in my own mind. But let's discuss a little bit your wonderful presentation, Living Well with Chronic Illness, a practical and spiritual guide. What inspired you to write this marvelous, marvelous presentation?
Well, really, there were two major events in my life. First was the death of our first grandchild at 4 months.
4 months.
4 months old. And his parents, our son and his wife, had just arrived in California, hadn't joined a parish, and they took the child to a daycare to try it out. When she came back, the child was dead. So we have this very tragic event.
In one day this happened?
Yes, in one day. The first day they were going to try out the daycare because she was a manager in a major corporation, and they were going to try out the daycare.
Oh, wow.
And she put the child in at 9, she comes back at noon, the child's dead. And suddenly, they're in California with no support structure, any social or church, and we're in New Jersey. The wife's, our daughter-in-law's family's from Indiana. So her pastor flew out, I flew out, and I wound up doing things I'd never been trained to do for, counseling our children, counseling family members, then conducting the funeral service. The pastor leaves, and I'm left to do the internment by myself. And my parish, God bless him, was faxing instructions on what to do to carry through these services. And when I got back to my parish, my pastor said, what you do is what deacons do. And he says, I'm willing to sponsor you into the diaconate program here in Trenton. So that's how I became a Diocese of Trenton deacon. And the second event is the fact that my wife was diagnosed with a neurological disease. And I guess, for better or worse, I was the first one to notice the symptoms. She's now going in her 10th year, and I've been her caretaker for all these years. And now it's become more difficult, and last year we now have a live-in nurse with us. But I do the midnight to 8 a.m. every day, then go to work. On the weekends, I do it from Friday night to Monday morning. So I understand caregiving, and it gives me insight into what it is to be a caregiver. Because patients change subtly, and the caregiver can become the eyes and ears of the healthcare providers, the doctors, the therapists, and so on. So those are two issues that brought me into saying, gee, we should share my hospital experiences with patients, my caregiving experience with patients.
And that was all very, very practical in a sense. You were just called into it by circumstances.
That's right. But I fortunately have a mother who was a nurse, a doctor who was a physician. I spent 12 years as an EMT. I taught medical school, nursing school. All these things came together. So I sense things that are happening to my wife and can anticipate them and cut them off before they become serious problems.
Now, you had an article, I think, in our newspaper, our diocesan newspaper,
Yes,
The Monitor, and you stated that pastoral counseling was personally satisfying because you understood two different perceptions, the doctors and the patients.
That's right. There are two different perceptions. When you come into the doctor's office, the doctor, he or she, has a specific amount of time to spend with you and I as a patient. They're trying to determine where we are on the path and course of that disease. Nothing's ever static. And the chronic patient's issue, quite often they don't see you for 3 or 6 months. And in 20 minutes, they're trying to figure out where you were before, where you are now, and where are you headed. So they're totally focused, using all their training in medical school and as practitioners of medicine to try to figure out where you and I are on the course of the medicine, of the disease. However, the patient's saying, hey, doc, how am I doing? That's usually the question. Hey, doc, how am I doing? And that refers to the patient's emotional and physical health as well as the disease. So the 3 layers I talk about, mental, physical, and spiritual, that's where the patient's coming from, and the doctor's coming from the disease side. As a hospital chaplain providing pastoral care, I'm the bridge. I bridge the gap between them, help the patient understand what the doctor's saying, and the doctor where the patient is. That's when I'm called into family meetings, I become the bridge.
Not so bad being the bridge, is it?
No, no, yes.
But you do that. Is it harder to do it with somebody in your own family? Like say you say you spend an awful lot of care and time with your wife, which is a wonderful gift, and it's a gift that I'm sure she appreciates very well. Is it different when you do it for someone that's a family member than say someone who is you just called in to be part of a team effect that helps that person understand what's happening to their life?
I think it always is. You know, I'm trained, I've been a professional in the field, seeing thousands of patients. And I try to do it carefully, but that's why having the live-in nurse is helpful, because we work off each other. I can say to her, you know, I saw something, and she says, I saw something. In addition, being trained, it's like an astronaut. You do what you have to do. If you're going to have emotions, you do it after the event. But so it's the advantage of having all this professional training that I can see things happening, and I have a nurse working with me in the home, and we do a 24-hour chart on my wife, so I can always go back and see what was happening and see trends and things. Because that's why I'm saying the caregiver is the eyes and ears of the doctor. That 20 minutes, if you can present the doctor with what the patient's been doing since the last visit, that is incredibly helpful.
Because I was going to say that not only can you be the eyes and ears for the doctor, but you can also be for the patient. Because I'm sure you can see some strength that comes back, or some strength that seems to ebb away from the person's body, and what they can do, what they can't do, and possibly even to kind of say, well, where are they at emotionally and spiritually?
Yes, yes.
Because you know the whole body somehow it's a unit.
Yes,
you know,
it is.
We don't cut it up in different pieces.
No, it starts with our mind, and from there it goes into our body, and it tells us how we're going to react to our situation. We're going to react very positively and go beyond our disease, or we can sit there mired in these negative emotions.
What does spirituality and faith play, Deacon Richard, in dealing with chronic illness?
Well, the spirituality, as you have read in my book, I present in two flavors. And I'll say, do you like ice cream? You'll say, what flavor do you like? Do you like vanilla, or do you like strawberry, or something else? Spirituality in the current world. Bellevue Hospital, where I serve as a volunteer deacon chaplain, it's a slice of life. I meet everybody. And as a chaplain, as a duty chaplain, I'm responsible for counseling everybody, faith or no faith. And I get a slice of New York, the homeless, the rich, the executive, just the middle-class worker, the firefighter. And in that sense, you have to respond to their needs and bring spirituality from their perspective, as opposed to imposing it. So spirituality is a way of thinking, a way of living that has certain qualities, as I point out in this book. And the first quality is a self-desire, an agreement with myself to live a spiritual life. And you say, well, what is a spiritual life? Well, there's certain guidelines. Spirituality is incorporated in every major religion in the world, but they teach it according to their teachings. They frame it that way. But you can be secularly spiritual, but that makes the responsibility of the person who says, I'm not with any group, I'm going to do it myself, to define their values. And there are certain values I see are very important in spirituality. One is, of course, commitment to that life. The second is acceptance. And that's a tough one. Accepting ourselves first, whoever we are, warts and all. Because if we accept ourselves, we can like ourselves. And then we can accept others as they are. And there's another aspect of spirituality I think is very important, gratitude, especially with a chronically ill patient. So often the patient begins to go inward and see themselves and think only about their disease. And the virtual army I was talking about, they don't respond. They don't say thank you. But there are all these people out there working their best to help the patient stay healthy. So those are the qualities of spirituality, however one takes it, through a religion, through the teachings of that religion, or on your own, secularly. But I think it creates an antidote for what is I see in today's society, which is the sense of entitlement. There's a great deal of sense of entitlements that developed since World War II. And that entitlement makes one look inward. Gratitude makes you look outward and say, gee, I do have gifts. I still have incredible gifts that some have disappeared with the illness, but I didn't even think about using these other gifts. There in my book, I have a story about a woman who has ALS, Lou Gehrig's they call it here. They call it different names. She can only move her toe. She taps out emails to people. She writes speeches that her son and daughter deliver in other countries. She's in Taiwan, and Taiwan developed the first ALS clinic in the country of Taiwan, but they put it in the capital. She convinced the authorities just a few months ago to put another clinic in her town, and all she can do is move her big toe, one letter at a time. So you see, the gifts are there, and it's the spirituality that opens us up to what gifts we have and to using them, to looking forward, to deciding what's important in our lives, and it gives us resilience.
It seems like what I'm hearing you say too is that if you have that spirituality, that faith, and we're not talking about a specific religion now, that it actually enhances the whole physical makeup of the human person and even enhances the health of that person at times.
Exactly. It does do that because it leaves the negative emotions behind. It focuses on what I think is important in my life, sets up those goals, and gets you marching toward the goals. Whether you reach those goals or not is not important. It's the fact that you're moving forward.
There's almost like in fact, if my mind is bringing back some thoughts here, there was a system of counseling called logotherapy, I think it was, that allows the person to say that, if I have a real will to live, and if I want to see what the outcome is going to be, it actually enhances my life and gives me a strength to live further and to want to be well and to want to do things.
Yes. And as you start, as an upward spiral, as it lifts you up one, you start looking forward, you start getting self-confidence, you develop a respect for yourself that lifts you out of the mire of these negative emotions.
So you're a chaplain in a hospital, a big hospital.
Big one.
How, all of this understanding, all of the gifts that you've had through the different training and practical experiences you had has to help your ministry in the hospital.
Yes, as we're talking about the doctor's perception, the medical perception, having taught medical students, nursing students. I was an EMT for 12 years. The EMT is the first one to see a patient who's cried out for help. And we get there and we're the first one and we respond to them. And it's a very interesting thing. When I taught EMTs, I would say, what's the most powerful medicine we have on the ambulance? Now, even the basic EMT has a few medicines they can use. And of course, being the instructor, they're kind of quiet. They don't want to make a mistake. They won't say. So I tell them, hold the patient's hands. And they immediately calm down. The pulse rate goes down. The breathing becomes better. That's the greatest medicine you can have. And it's the same thing in a hospital room or in a patient's home. When you come up there and show that you are present for them, immediately they change.
It's a way of saying you're loved. It's a way of saying you're valuable. It's a way of saying you're part of my life.
That's right. You're no longer just something lying there on the stretcher. You're a human being whom I respect.
Even doctors or anyone who goes into a room, where someone is sick, however, just the way you present yourself. You walk in with a smile, or you walk in and with a calmer voice, and it's not just the facts. It's really how you. And I've often thought, gee, what a gift it is for people that are in a hospital bed, no matter what their age is, and that someone can go in and hold a hand, as you just said, or maybe brush the forehead, or just especially if it's your parent or somebody like that. That's a wonderful gift that you're returning back to that person, knowing that they're very valuable. And the thing that's so beautiful about I think spirituality and faith is that we recognize that all life has dignity, and all life is really meaningful. And I think that's just a wonderful gift to give hope to people, but also to share, that as they go through their journey.
Yes,
because
it
we all
is
have
a journey.
Tell me a little bit about some stories that you might want to share that you've had from your experiences?
Oh, sure. Well, one, you were just talking about spirituality and faith. I was just sharing with you before we went on that article appeared about my experiences at Bellevue Hospital during the evacuation during Hurricane Sandy. The article was called "Caring for the Sick and Dying During Hurricane Sandy." There are 3 hospitals on the East River, very close to the river: NYU, Bellevue, and the VA hospital. They all got flooded. And it turns out that NYU and Bellevue had to evacuate their patients. And NYU started Monday, I remember that, Monday of the hurricane, while the hurricane was in full force, they were evacuating some 300 patients. Wow. And then Bellevue started, and on the second day of the storm, I went in, and it turns out I was the only chaplain there. And I decided the most fragile patients are the hospice. So I, with my handy little flashlight, managed to find my way up the darkened stairs where the National Guard were passing medicines up by hand up to the floor. And I spent the day counseling the hospice patients and their family members. And 2 of them died while I was there, and a third was dying actively. And I did services. But what I learned was that those who have faith practice their faith, not just in saying, am a this or that, but actually practice their faith, had a resilience because there was no water, no electricity. The food was cold sandwiches brought up 7 floors by people. They were just, and they'd been there for almost 48 hours. The ones with faith, who practiced the faith, not only were resilient, they're saying, well, go over and help that person. They need it more. So I saw in action what could happen.
That had to be an experience that you'll never, never, never forget.
No, I'd never seen anything like that.
Gosh. For a patient with chronic illness, do they have responsibility for their own life, so to speak, or their own health, or their own welfare and care?
Well, it's always been said that, in the medical profession, the patient who takes care and participates in their own care is a better patient. They're healthier. But this is a trend that is really starting up now because of the perfect healthcare storm. Too many patients, not enough healthcare providers. And the effort is to get the patient to understand that if they take responsibility for their own health care, that is giving direction, they're not actually this is not a do-it-yourself project, but is that they participate, and I call it the stop, look, and listen process. When you get a diagnosis and it's overwhelming, just stop. Sit down and take some deep breaths and clear your mind. That's the stop. The look is to learn everything you can about the disease, learn the jargon so you can communicate with the doctors, the healthcare providers, and then decide where you are along that journey of the disease. Now, that stop, look, listen to everyone who's helping you in your army, because they're all advisors, and you make the decision what kind of health care you want. That's the process of taking responsibility. It doesn't mean you take care of yourself and get out of bed and know all these things, but you help give direction to those who are caring for you.
You know what I feel, Doc, is that if we pay attention to our bodies, you can tell the difference between being, say, tired because you're overworked or tired because the heart's not pumping right. You can almost, you can tell the different feelings about what's going on, and that you can articulate to your doctor or your healthcare people.
Yes.
It's kind of like, say, or certain medicines. I mean, the doctor might know that this medicine is good for you, but doesn't know how it's going to react to you as an individual.
Right.
Unless you say to him, I'm feeling itchy, or I'm feeling, whatever it is.
Right, exactly.
I mean, the doctors aren't mind readers.
That's right, exactly.
So we have to share with them. We have to be a participant, I think, in the whole process of our own health.
And in doing so, you feel better and you gain self-confidence because you're participating. You're not just a puppet on a string. You are part of this decision.
And again, you're not just an object.
Yes.
You're a human, a dignified person. In chapter 2 of your book, you equate the stages of dealing with a chronic illness diagnosis with the grieving process. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah. Among the very emotions released by the diagnosis, grieving is one of the most important. But it's a different kind of grieving. If we lose a loved one, we grieve over them. But the person we're grieving about in this case is ourself. And that can be very hard to get over. because you begin to grieve of, oh, you know, when I get to retirement, I had planned to do this, or I won't see my daughter's wedding, or I won't see my grandchild, I won't get that job. The vacation we were going to go on next year, it's not possible. That kind of grieving can be worked on and resolved. The grieving never goes away, but we learn through what I called Sarah. Shock of the diagnosis, the anger that comes with the grief, the resistance to change. Oh, I'm just always going to be grieving. And finally, when you accommodate and adjust to it and accept it, you can move on. If you can't get to that acceptance, you can't move on your journey, and you can't get better.
I know once I had the experience of what you're talking about, I think, anyway, where I was having some heart difficulties. Mm-hmm. And I said to myself, I said, well, gee, maybe I won't be able to play golf or tennis. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, maybe I can fish.
Yeah, see.
But it turned out that I can still play golf and tennis and do very well and still fish or whatever I want to do.
Now I've got three things.
Now I got three things to do. But I do think the mental outlook means an awful lot, you know. What do you believe is the key to surviving a chronic illness?
I think,
if there's any one key, maybe there's lots
it's
of
getting
keys.
over fear,
and
especially the fear of change. You know, a long time ago, Franklin Roosevelt said the greatest fear we have is the fear of self. Yeah. And that's true with patients. It brings out fears, and we start thinking the worst. That's why caregivers and people who support us can help us move beyond that.
As a deacon, I know you're a man of faith, you wouldn't be a deacon. Has that strengthened you through this process of not only caring for someone with chronic illness, but even to help you write and especially I think to share with a loved one like your wife and family? And
I think the diaconate's wonderful because it brings you down to a level of acceptance of the gifts you have and the gifts you don't have, and just use them. I say to myself, when I say my prayers, they've been lent to me. So I'm going to use them to whatever I can. And I think the diaconate teaches us. Here's a story we had. During the diaconate, we take over the feeding of the homeless over in Trenton, over at the cathedral. We do it one Saturday, and I got to do the sandwich. I got to do the lunches to give to them. And during the class, as they were preparing for us, they said, there are two decisions in giving. You have the decision to give. They have the decision what they do with it, and you have nothing to do with the second decision.
But it's nice to know that we can be part of that decision making. Deacon, thank you so very, very much. We can get some information about your book, and people can get that information. Catholic Corner, bless you, love you, be a part of our life, and never be afraid. There's a great God. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.